But there were two fixed contributions. There was a contribution of silver for the purchase of the sacrifices. And here, each person gave 1/2 shekel. And this contribution was on an annual basis, because annually the sacrifices had to be purchased. And then there was a one-time contribution of silver for the Adonim. The Adonim were the foundation of the Mishkan. The vertical boards that were called krushim fit into sockets. The best way to describe it is imagine a cinder block which has holes in it, and you can insert vertical beams into those holes so they'll remain erect. That's how the Mishkan was established. There were silver adonim, these silver bases, and the vertical boards, which were covered with gold, fit into them, and that's how the walls of the Mishkan were made. So it's very interesting that...
were they attached to the ground at all themselves?
No, they sat on the ground.
They just sat flat on the ground.
They couldn't be attached because they were moved from place to place as they traveled to the desert.
Right.
So they didn't have a fixed...
They didn't have stakes that helped
right.
people.
Now the interesting thing is this, then why did some of the contributions were fixed and some of the contributions were optional, a function of their generosity? Several possibilities present themselves. One point we have to understand is that there's a basic difference between the building of the Mishkan and the bringing of korbanos. The bringing of korbanos is an act of avoda. It's an act of service. It is a way of symbolically demonstrating our subservience to God. And therefore it could be argued that it should not be done in a way that looks like it's voluntary, it's a function of my goodwill, or as if I am God's servant and God is my master, then God tells me what to do. And that's really the idea of it being a fixed amount. Whereas when it's voluntary, you give as much as you want, as little as you want. If you don't want, don't give it all. So then it appears more like this is my goodwill, which is operating here, which is contrary to the entire idea of what a korban is. A korban is a symbolic act of self-negation, of subservience, of servitude. And therefore it has to be demanded, it has to be required. So God says, it's a fixed amount, you have to give it. Even if you want to give more, this is all I will accept. If you want to give less, I demand of you the larger amount. And for the purchase of korbanos, we understand exactly why it has to be a fixed amount. That's very, very simple. The building of the Mishkan, on the other hand, this is really the building of a common home. We are dwelling together with God. We are sharing a home. And that's a relationship which has to be entered into voluntarily. It's like a marriage. And therefore we understand that the materials for the building of the Mishkan should be a function of generosity and goodwill. The problem is that we have a contradiction within the contributions for the Mishkan. Everything, for the most part, was given voluntarily, but there was one ingredient, even in the structure of the Mishkan, which was not voluntary. This was the silver for the Adonim, the silver for these bases. So our conjecture seems to be reasonable, that the contributions for the building should be voluntary, but why is the silver for the Adonim the exception? That's the question we're going to grapple with tonight.
They came from the half shkolim? They came from after shekel?
After shekel. The Mukubalim, the mystics tell us that gold and silver have a symbolism. Gold symbolizes Yiras Hashem, fear of God. And silver symbolizes love of God. That's what the Mukubalim tell us. Now, in reality, this is really a consequence of a much deeper symbolism. Gold symbolizes the Midas Hadin of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It symbolizes the attribute of divine justice. Gold has a reddish tinge. The Gemara says this. The Gemara says that gold resembles blood. There are different types of gold, but the finest gold has a reddish tinge, the Gemara says. By the way, the gold that we use is never pure. You know that. It's always alloyed with silver.
Too soft.
Pardon?
It would be too soft.
Yeah, too soft. That's the idea of a carat, right? What is the definition of a carat? Not a carat of a diamond. That's with a different measure. But the carat of gold, you see, 10 karat gold, 14 karat gold. What is a carat?
It's the content of the actual gold.
A carat is 1/24th. With pure gold would be 24 karat gold, which means 24/24th gold, right? 14 karat gold means it's 14 parts in 24 of gold. The rest is silver. 10 karat gold is even more silver. So our gold, the gold that we use, even...
Is it always silver that it's mixed with?
Really silver, yeah. So therefore our gold really is far from pure. And that's why it leans towards white, because it's alloyed with silver. But pure gold, the Gemara says, would be reddish.
Like bars of gold, that's pure gold.
I don't know. I don't know if it is or not. But in any case, it symbolizes the Midas Hadin, the attribute of divine judgment. Red is the symbol of Midas Hadin. It's the symbol of blood. It's the symbol of judgment. Silver, of course, is white. And that symbolizes chesed. It symbolizes God's kindness. Now, how do we respond to these divine attributes? As we respond to the Midas Hadin with fear. As when we perceive God as sitting in judgment, what is the natural response? Yiras Hashem, fear of God. When we perceive Hashem as benevolent and kind, so what is the natural response? To love God. So therefore, gold first is a symbol of the Midas Hadin, the attribute of divine justice, but secondarily, it becomes a symbol of Yiras Hashem, fear of God. And the silver symbolizes the Midas HaChesed, the attribute of God's kindness, and therefore, by extension, it also symbolizes our response to God's kindness, which is the Avas Hashem, the love of God. Now, the question is this. Where do these patterns of relationship come from? As a person that comes to fear of God, comes to love of God, where does this sprout from? Where does a person's fear of God come from? Where does a person's love of God come from? Now, the Rambam says something very, very surprising. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Yesodei Torah that love of God and fear of God come from the same place. There is a reflection, there is a thought. When you think this thought, at the same time, you will be filled with love of God and fear of God. And that thought is when a person reflects on the nature of God, on the greatness of God, the magnificence of His works, His wisdom, at that moment, you become filled with love and fear simultaneously. Now the question is, what do we mean to love God? What does it mean to love God? Well, love is a word that we use for many different types of relationships. As we love our children. We love our spouses. We're not quite in the same way. There's parental love and romantic love are not the same thing. Right? The ancient Greeks had two different words for them. Right? Parental love is agape. Romantic love is eros. Because the truth is, the two have nothing in common. You know, it's really, to use one word for the two is seemingly problematic. The fact that Lashon HaKodesh also uses one word forces us to think that maybe our conception of love requires a redefinition. But what does it mean to love God? And we certainly love Him in the sense that we love our children. We don't feel compelled to take care of God, to address His needs, etc. And I don't think we love God in the romantic sense either. So what does it mean to love God?
We're prepared to forego our own.
So the Rambam understands that to love God is to love knowledge of God. A person who has a yearning to know God, that is a person who loves God. But loving God means to love the knowledge of God. To love the knowledge of God. And a person who is curious and interested in learning about God, we would say is a person who loves God. It's a totally different concept. It's not like love of parents, not like love of children, not like love of friends, not like love of spouse. It's a yearning to know God. That's what love of God is. And the Rambam says that if a person reflects on God's great works, on how He manages history, and how He created the world, immediately the person is filled with a tremendous desire to know God, and that is love of God. At the same time, says the Rambam, the person is filled with a sense of his own insignificance, his own puniness. What am I? I'm so little, I'm so small in relation to God, His magnificence. So the same reflection brings a person to love of God and fear of God, but again, only because the Rambam defines the love of God in such a peculiar way. Whereas because he defines love of God as the yearning to know God, therefore the same reflection brings a person to want to know God and to recognize his own insignificance. What's the Rambam says?
I don't think it's as different as you say it is. The reason you want to know a person you love, a person, child, a spouse, is because you want to do for them what they need. It's how you show your love to a large degree. We have the sense that we want to do God's will.
But it's not the same thing.
How could someone do God's will without having an understanding of what that will is?
It's not the same thing. To love another human being, the knowing the human being is the means to an end. In other words, I have to know you to be able to attend to your needs, to satisfy you, to address the physical needs, the emotional needs, psychological needs, etc. So the knowing is the means to the end. The Rambam holds, when it comes to love of God, the knowing God is the end. It's not the means to the end. It is the end in itself. It is the objective. We do mitzvahs to know God. It's not that we want to know God to be able to better do His will. We do His will as a means of coming to know Him. It's the exact opposite. It's the cart and the horse reversing positions. Because our objective is to know God, just like learning is a means to that end, mitzvahs are also a means to the end.
In a sense, I would agree with you, because if you could know God, which we hold that we can't actually know God in complete sense, then you could not do but His will. It's part of the definition, as we say about the malachim.
No, but I think more than that. I'm saying
that is the result of it. So that
in the Rambam system,
so they're not separate.
In the Rambam system, all the mitzvahs that God gives are pathways to come to know Him.
Right.
It's not that
That's
we
the
have to
end,
know
that's,
him to be able to do his will. His will is that we do certain deeds precisely because these deeds bring us to know him. But the goal, the objective is to know him. So it's not a means to an end, it is the end. It's the end of everything else that we do.
That's Rambam's view. The Pirkei Avos is the same?
That's the Rambam's view. Now the Rambam undoubtedly holds this is consistent with Chazal. I think that there are opinions that disagree, but the Rambam certainly takes this. So because that is the definition that he operates with, that's why reflecting on God and his greatness generates love of God in this sense and fear of God simultaneously. The truth is that there are hints from Hasidic works that they have a different approach. And this is not based on a systematic study, but just you begin to pick up from certain statements that are made in Hasidic works that they had a different approach. The Sfas Emes, for example, says a very interesting thing. There's a famous Gemara which says, Hakol bidei shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven, chutz mi yirah shamayim, except for the fear of heaven. Now, when we study that statement in the Talmud, we take it to mean the following, that everything is in the hands of heaven. How tall you are, how short you are, your color hair, etc., except the moral choices that you make. That's up to you, because man is given free will. That's the simple meaning. But the Sfas Emes is bothered. That's not really what the text says. It doesn't say that everything is in the hands of heaven except your moral choices. It says everything is in the hands of heaven except your fear of God. Meaning that even within the category of moral choices, there may be some that are different. And the Sfas Emes points out that it's only fear of God which is not in the hands of heaven, but love of God may be different. Which is perplexing, because I would think that love of God is also a choice that we make. And Sfas Emes explains in a very, very peculiar way. He says like this. He says, how do you come to fear God? So here he agrees with the Rambam. You come to fear God through your knowledge of God. The more you know about God, the more you fear God. How do you come to know God? You study, you investigate, you observe, etc. Some people will choose to investigate, some people will choose to learn, some people will choose not to. So the amount of yirah shamayim, the amount of fear of heaven you have, is really up to you. If you are inquisitive, if you study, if you learn, then you'll have more yirah shamayim. If you decide to ignore your studies and to engage in other things, you'll have less yirah shamayim. So it's really up to you. When it comes to fear of God, it's up to you.